I'm going to do a docu-series on how big of a piece of turd you are that you went around somebody's back that has been working for your butt for 2.5 freaking years. What happens to you when a buyer tries to go around your back? It's going to happen if you're in wholesale, real estate, agency, whatever it may be. It's going to happen to you. It's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. So what do you do when a buyer goes around your back, whether it's a wholesaler or an end buyer? In this video, we're going to be talking about Angie Milanazzo, one of our main leaders in Denver. She is out looking for buyers to buy houses for. Now, she's not acting as an agent. She's actually a deal finder slash wholesaler, right? I make a point for everybody in here using Angie's story. So pay attention to this for just a second. Angie, Angie, and Dom have been working with helping this buyer, I think his name is Matt.
Yes.
Find a forever home for him and his family.
Yes.
And you've been helping him for literally 2.5 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
For 2.5 years, Angie starts looking for deals for buyer, Mr. Matt. 2.5 years. Now, why did it take her 2.5 years? Well, because the buyer is picky. In those 2.5 years, Angie's probably done 300 or 400 other wholesale, creative finance, wraps, lease options, all sorts of other types of transactions. But it took her 2.5 years to find this specific buyer a deal. Send him deal after deal after deal after deal. And the way that she found that deal is she worked out with a seller directly. Now, this seller, selling their house in Denver, Colorado, sold this property to Angie Milanazzo on creative terms. This is called the A-B contract. A, seller, B, the person who gets the property under contract, and Angie actually gets it in her company's name. Why does she do that? Well, because as a deal finder, it's her ability to now own the contract. She doesn't have to buy the property, but now what she can do is she can go create what is called a C-B contract or a B-C contract. So party B right here, boom, party A here, and party C here. Okay, so not only do you go and help him get the deal under contract, negotiate with the seller, do the paperwork, all the things, you then get him under contract. The buyer says, absolutely, oh my gosh, my wife will be thrilled, my kids will be thrilled, that's such a perfect house for us. I can't wait as a buyer to move to Denver, Colorado, so I can be closer to Angie Milanazzo and I can do deals with her. Now, here's what happens. Angie gets the purchase contract with the seller. She then sends this contract down to the title company and officially opens escrow. Now, the escrow officer takes that contract and starts working on the paperwork. They start communicating with the seller. They start communicating with Angie. They start doing what is called a title report, making sure there's nothing funky about the house that is currently under contract. And then Angie goes out and gets a B to C contract saying, hey, buyer, you are aware that I'm wholesaling this contract to you at a higher price. Now, Angie doesn't have to disclose to this buyer how much money she's making. All she has to disclose to this buyer is how much he's buying the property for. How much she's making is really none of his business.
He thought he was paying $15,000, okay, for the assignment. But I told him, I said, I'm going to be wrapping this to you. He didn't know how much I was making on the other side. I was making $15,000. So I was going to make a total of $30,000. So I had A to B contract with the seller and then my B to C contract with Matt. So it was $15,000 I was making on the spread from Matt purchasing it. And then he was giving me an additional $15,000 for my assignment.
Angie has $30,000 in potential profit, which I actually think for a lot of people that are out there that have never done a wholesale deal, they look at this and they go, man, $30,000 seems like a lot of money. I look at that and I go, $30,000 for 2.5 years worth of work? I don't think so. But of course, she's done hundreds of deals between now and then. And so it's not like she's only spent all that time doing that one deal, but still 30 grand seems kind of light to me. I would have been like, man, you've been such a pain in the butt. I'm going to charge you a lot more money. But regardless, she gets into a B to C contract with that buyer, and then she takes that contract and opens escrow with that buyer as well. So now they are officially in one transaction, right? The escrow officer is aware of what's going on. She's aware of the A, the B, and the C party. Okay, so you were wrapping this deal to him. Perfect, love it. Matt, who's not in Subto, by the way, ends up ghosting Angie. And Matt goes directly to the title company and says, hey, Angie's not involved in this anymore. I'm going to be buying this directly. He completely cuts Angie out of the deal, like so blatantly obvious. He just cuts her out of the deal. What happened was, and this will happen in your career, the buyer ends up calling the seller directly and working out a contract with the seller directly. And the buyer basically calls the seller and says, hi, I'm actually the one buying the property, and this lady, Angie, I don't even know how much money she's charging you, but she's not the actual person buying the house. Now, the buyer should not be doing this because they're gonna cut their nose off to spite their face, which means Angie and that buyer are never gonna do another deal together. But does Matt really care? Because this is his family home. And he's not a wholesaler, he's not a fix and flipper. He doesn't care about his reputation in the industry. And so for him, he's like, this is my family home, and if this lady's charging me 30 grand to find this deal, I'm gonna try and cut her out of the way. Does it suck? Yes. Is Matt an absolute scumbag? Yes. So Angie calls me and she says, Pace, what do I do? Now, that's what this video is actually about. A, B, and C. You have a couple of choices, okay? A, you do what I don't wanna do ever, is you move on. And you just say, man, I screwed up, okay? And the thing that you screwed up on is something that you made a mistake in the very beginning, is that when you get a contract with the seller and then you get a contract with the buyer, what she should have done also is she should have gone to the county recorder and she should have filed a memorandum, okay? Now, a memorandum prevents a buyer from going around your back and contracting and then closing. It doesn't prevent the buyer from getting a contract with the seller directly and going around your back, but what it does prevent is that buyer now is gonna go to the title company with their own A to B contract and say, hey, we're gonna try and close escrow without Angie. Angie, because she has a memorandum on the property, that will legally and physically prevent that buyer from closing escrow and doing that deal. And sadly, one of the biggest mistakes she made is she did no memorandum.
Angie did a great job. She did all the right paperwork. She did all the right stuff. No matter what happens, she did everything right. The only thing I would say that she could have done better is probably file a memorandum. But it's like after 2.5 freaking years, you would think there's no way this guy's going to go around Angie's back.
I truly did not think he would ever do that, because he's moving here to Colorado where we're supposed to do deals together, and he was going to come to the office, and I told him he could have, an office. I'm like, why would you ruin that relationship? I was helping him. I'm like, oh my gosh.
This is a perfect time that she should have used a memorandum, because she had a buyer on the line. She didn't want her buyer going around her back. She should have filed a memorandum. Guess what? She didn't. So option A, she just moves on and says, that's my fault. I didn't protect myself, okay? Option B is you call an attorney, and this starts costing money, okay? You call an attorney and you do what is called a lis pendens. A lis pendens means I have a pending lawsuit. I'm going to stop this transaction from happening, and I'm going to go after you and sue you for specific performance. Now, the challenge with going this route with calling an attorney, I've done this 7 times, and I have won 100% of the time. I've never lost a suit ever. However, the problem is it costs money up front, and then you get that money reimbursed back out of the transaction. So for example, Angie could have sued the buyer and said, you violated our agreement, you went around my back, this is a specific performance claim, and not only are you going to be forced to pay me, but you're gonna be forced to pay my attorney. That's happened multiple times, but in that situation, you're fronting money. A memorandum would have solved it in $17, but now an attorney going after this buyer, this is gonna cost you probably $7,000 to $12,000 minimum to go after that. And so not filing a memorandum cost Angie $7,000 to $12,000. Now, luckily, my text exchange going back and forth with Angie is I said, Angie, what's the name of your buyer? Because what I feel like doing is I actually feel like ousting this buyer and talking about and documenting this buyer out on YouTube so that people can understand who this person is and they can understand what goes on. What very quickly happened, and this is the third thing you can do, but sadly, you're not doing it, is you can actually have a brand big enough that people won't mess with you. When you're an individual like Angie who's just starting her YouTube channel, she's just starting her brand, this buyer is like, I don't care, what are you gonna do to me, right? What are you gonna do to me? Call an attorney and go pay $7,000 to $12,000 and take a year to come after me? This buyer's thinking, you're not gonna go do this. And so he also thinks you're not a big enough fish because you haven't built your brand, you haven't produced enough content, you haven't gotten out there in the world and made it so you have a big enough voice. I, on the other hand, Angie reaches out to me and she says, Pace, what would you do? And I said, tell that buyer that if he doesn't call you back and he doesn't get you paid on this transaction, that I will be doing a full expose on this transaction, because I think it's actually needed in the industry. I think we should out all the snakes.
So I get a hold of Matt and I say, hey brother, I don't want to threaten you, but this is going to be some of the greatest YouTube content for everybody in this industry, just to point out that there's snakes like you in the industry. So he was ghosting you this whole time. Yeah. And then because I reached out in the way that I reached out, and I basically rustled the embers underneath the fire, and I said, I'm going to freaking document you piece of shiznit. You do not mess with people in this community. I will put you on blast. He then reaches out to you, and I call you and I go, hey, Angie, he's going to call you and you need to record this call, because I assume, and I don't know Matt well enough, I assume he probably was like, why the heck did you get other people involved? I was going to take care of you. I was going to pay you. Did he say anything like that?
No, he was scared to death. He was apologizing. He was like, I'm so sorry. You've worked so hard for me. And even my dad said, you should not do that to your friend. You need to pay her. He's like, but I don't know how much you were making totally on the other side. I said, well, it was 30,000. So you're going to have to make me payments. And he was like, oh, I promise you I'll make payments. And
okay, so immediately here's what we do. You have to, Angie, you know this better than anybody. Right now, he's emotionally charged in a way that he would sign just about anything that you put in front of him. You need to get something together that says, I'm putting a lien against your house until you pay me my 30,000 bucks. You need a lien and a promissory note from this guy as fast as possible. Otherwise, a week goes by, 2 weeks goes by, and the fire dwindles down. You need to get that signed.
So you have to protect yourself, and you have to make sure that you're weeding those people out from your life. But Angie's not in a strong enough position to do that. So she reaches out to me. I told Angie, I said, I will help you pay for the attorney's fees, and I will document and show people exactly what it takes to go after the buyer and after the seller, because guess who else is at fault? The seller and Angie have a contract. It's the A to B contract. The buyer and Angie have a contract. That's the B2C contract. So there's actually two people at fault in this situation. And so I would love to go after
Matt.
I would love to go after the seller just to show them this is not okay in this industry. We have an agreement. Angie is fulfilling on her agreement. We're going through a title and escrow company. It's going to be recorded at the county recorder's office. You just didn't want to pay somebody after 2.5 years worth of your work.
So here's my question. Does this now change maybe the way that you do things, where now you're like, I don't care who you are, and putting a memorandum on the property?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. But like you said, I out of 2 years, 2.5 years, and he was on the team bringing deals. So I just was like in shock. I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay. Well, family does it. And then your friends do it. It just sucks, but it's okay.
Okay, so we've already answered the question. How do I protect myself up front? Memorandum. File a memorandum when you get a house under contract, but this is basically all you have. If somebody screws you on a transaction, you either move on and realize you were silly, you didn't protect yourself. B, you call an attorney and start spending money. Or C, you have a big enough brand that you can scare the lights out of somebody because they don't want to be put out online proof that they went around your back. I'm going to make sure that we have a Zoom with Angie and I talking about the details of this deal, give you a little bit more insight in what happened and what transpired. Watch this conversation with me and Angie, and we'll see you in the next video.
Freaking Matt